talking. I'm Catherine and I'm a design researcher. So that means I specialise in using design thinking and research to support charities and social businesses to develop or improve their programmes and services by really working alongside users and participants to understand their needs and experiences. So I joined Catch-22 towards the end of last year to lead a 6-month research and innovation project, which was to explore how to effectively support young people facing disadvantage to thrive online, particularly 16 to 24-year-olds who've been excluded from mainstream education. The primary focus of this project was to develop ideas and recommendations for programmes or services that would effectively support this cohort of young people to thrive online and in life. And after some exploratory research to understand young people's digital experiences and the barriers they face to thriving online, we then co-designed 3 ideas with a group of young people who'd all experienced school exclusion for programmes that could tackle these barriers and support young people to thrive online and in life. We've shared young people's ideas and everything we learned from the project in a report, which we launched towards the end of last month. So if you are interested in hearing more about that, do check it out. I think Melissa might pop the link in the chat. But the reason I've just mentioned all of that is that there was also a secondary strand of this project, which was focused on exploring how to effectively engage young people online and thus support them to thrive in online programs and services. And this became more and more of an important focus of the project as a lot of the work we did with young people ended up having to take place online due to COVID restrictions, including the collaborative design process. So taking a step back, what is the challenge in the first place as we understood it, and why can it be difficult to engage young people facing disadvantage in online settings? There are challenges from the perspective of young people and practitioners. So for young people, they're regularly quite unhelpfully labelled as being hard to reach and disengaged, and that labels can often kind of considered to extend from the offline world into the online world. And young people do often state an explicit preference for in-person interactions over and above online interactions, which we heard ourselves. But we found that when we actually incentivize young people to take part in online programs, they also recognize the benefits of those happening online. So both in terms of being way more convenient, particularly for young people who had caring responsibilities. There were a couple of people in the group we were working with who had young children, and it just made it much easier for them to attend regularly. And they also recognize that it can be a lot easier to get to know someone online before you meet them in person, and then that can actually remove some of the worries about meeting someone you don't know in real life. There are also lots of challenges around digital devices and data and space and confidence and skills, both for participants and actually those delivering services and programs. Something that we've heard as part of the Social Switch program that's run by Catch-22, that often practitioners express that they feel they don't really have the confidence or skill set to successfully deliver digital programs. And even for the most confident practitioners, it does require a lot of extra time and effort to be able to design effective online sessions that are responsive and flexible to young people. So this is actually something that Catch-22 have been grappling with for some time. We conducted some research back in 2020 in response to COVID and the shift of services online, which identified 4 different conditions to effectively engage young people online who face disadvantage. And then in this project, a mix of desk research and one-to-one interviews allowed me and Libby, who I worked with closely on this project, allowed us to build these out further into 5 principles and to also bring together a whole set of different examples and case studies of tools and techniques to engage young people online. And then in our online co-design workshops with young people, which were 6 2-hour online workshops with a team of 8 young people who'd all had experience of being excluded from mainstream education, Libby and I kind of explicitly tried out these tools and techniques and asked young people their thoughts on which they most enjoyed and which had helped them feel most comfortable to contribute. So then we were able to kind of refine our thinking and collate it and bring it all together into this top tips guide that we're sharing today. So what did we learn? We had two really important realizations that I think helped everything else fall into place. So firstly, we've been talking and thinking about digital outreach and digital engagement as two separate things, but actually we realized that was really our perspective as people delivering an online program, and didn't mirror up with the experience of those participating in them. So we kind of shifted our thinking to start to think about digitally enabled engaging programs and services, where actually digital outreach marketing is just kind of one part of the journey that young people experience. And so that meant when we were thinking about, well, what does it look like in terms of effectively engaging young people online, we realized that actually kind of what good looks like is the same as, is similar when it comes to effectively reaching young people online as well. I think the other really important realization we had was that we realized that the best way to engage young people online was to really take the principles of effectively engaging, supporting, building a relationship with a young person in person, which as practitioners we all do so automatically, and transfer that into the digital space. So instead of kind of starting with and focusing on shiny digital activities or programs or services for the sake of it, we realized we needed to use digital tools as and when was most appropriate way to help meet young people's needs. So it was from these realizations and really thinking actually about those needs around engaging and supporting and building relationships that we were able to kind of pull out these 5 different principles for effective online engagement. So the top tips guide goes through each principle and outlines in more detail what that means in practice, and it shares some examples that we collated from our own experience and lots of other organizations to really kind of bring each principle to life. Today I'm just going to go through a bit more detail about each principle and just share one example. I think it's worth saying that a lot of this might not feel particularly revolutionary, but that's actually because often it's a simple transfer from what you might do in person into a digital medium. But it's our hope that through kind of this guide and through the wider discussion today of people sharing their own examples, that everyone will leave with just kind of a few new ideas and a little bit of extra inspiration. Also, the reason you're hearing from me today is that we were unable to invite young people to share their experiences directly, because part of the agreement to take part in the project in the first place was based on a promise of anonymity. That's a word I struggle to say. So I'm going to do my best to represent their experiences using some quotes that they were happy for us to share. Okay, so the first principle is about ensuring young people feel safe and comfortable. And this is about engaging with young people in digital spaces and in ways that help them both to feel physically and emotionally safe and comfortable. So an example of this could be using online games and gaming environments. As we know, these are spaces where young people often feel safe and comfortable. Although I have an interesting example of this. So in our co-design workshops with young people, we'd really planned to do that, to play a range of online games and to host at least one session in Discord, just to try that out. But when we suggested it, it became really apparent that this would be very divisive. So actually, whilst it would make half of the group feel really comfortable, it would make the other half of the group extremely uncomfortable. The quote here kind of was when one of the young people realized that loads of them had a shared interest in gaming and suggested doing a Call of Duty deathmatch. And another young person immediately said, if you do that, I'm not coming. I don't like it. That's not for me. So as a result, actually, we played a range of more kind of lo-fi digital games that everyone felt comfortable with and could readily access, such as Scriblio and doing different quizzes and things. So that was kind of where we met in the middle. But I thought, yeah, basically we just wanted to be guided by what actually was going to make the group feel safe and comfortable. Principle number 2 is about ensuring accessibility and clarity of understanding for all young people. So this is about using digital tools to create greater clarity for young people in ways that really supports every individual's learning style and needs and preferences. So one example of this is using digital visual content rather than something that's got lots of text, as often that's much easier for people to kind of understand and interact with. So we actually invited a digital artist, and I kind of showed some pictures actually that he'd created earlier on, and we invited him to join one of our sessions where we were brainstorming ideas, and he drew in real time the ideas that the group were coming up with and set up his camera so that everybody else could see these being drawn as they were speaking, and that gave young people something really tangible to look at and to engage with and to respond to throughout the brainstorming, rather than just a set of words. And I think it really helped to add to their ideas and take them much further than they would have gone otherwise. And this quote kind of summarizes that. One young person told us kind of when we were reflecting in the last session on all the sessions that they'd really liked the artist capturing what they said and drawing it, because it kind of made their ideas feel really real. So the third principle is about ensuring young people feel completely in control and that everything is their choice. So this is about engaging in ways that help young people feel they have the ultimate power and choice in what they do and how they do it, so that they feel they're taking part on their own terms. And I think probably a good example of this is consistently prioritizing young people's freedom to choose whether to have their camera on or off in an online setting. We decided for our co-design workshops that we actually really wanted the young people to be able to decide exactly how much and when they turn their camera on. And so we promised, it was kind of one of the things we said in the very first session, that we would never ask anyone to turn on their camera if they didn't want to. And we stuck to that throughout. And whilst I was fully expecting that in the first session, given we were bringing together a group of 8 young people who'd never met each other before, I was fully expecting that nobody would have their cameras turned on in that session. But we had hoped that over the course of the sessions, as people began to feel more comfortable, that they'd start to turn them on. But actually the default became cameras off nearly all of the time, apart from myself and Libby, who were facilitating. And to be honest, that it made it really difficult to do our jobs well, to facilitate sessions, to be able to check in on how young people were finding things. But in the feedback at the end, we learned that actually this promise and really sticking to it was something that they'd all really appreciated, was a key factor in helping them really feel like they could feel comfortable to contribute on their own terms. And this quote can really captures that. However, some did mention that they would have actually really liked to have turned on their camera a couple of points, but they just didn't want to be the only one. So we clearly didn't get that right balance between helping people feel just as comfortable to keep their cameras on as to turn them off. I think there's probably some things we could have done to build in more kind of moments of camera work into early sessions. For example, in one of the later sessions, we played a guess the sound game, and then people turned their camera on to reveal what was making the sound. And I think perhaps if we'd done that a bit earlier, that might have helped people feel a bit more comfortable. But yeah, I don't think we've cracked this, the cameras on or off. And so I'd actually, when we get into the discussion later on, I'd be really interested to hear how other people have approached it, and kind of in a way that makes young people still feel like they're in control. But for now, I'm going to move on to principle 4. So principle 4 is about establishing and maintaining trust. So using digital tools in ways that build connection and trust and relationships, and encourage ongoing engagement and participation. And based on our experience, I'd actually suggest probably investing over a quarter of your time together online in doing this and building rapport. Across the 6 sessions, we dedicated the entire first session and approximately a quarter of each of the following sessions to getting to know each other and building rapport and connection through chat and through different games. And it did feel like a lot of time. And actually, after 4 sessions, we'd started to think maybe we could just slightly shorten this. It feels like everyone knows each other and is more comfortable. But when we tried in session 5 to go kind of pretty much straight into the main activity with only a short bit of kind of chat to just ease everybody in, actually the young people found it really difficult to relax and settle into and engage with the activity, and we ended up on a bit of a tangent that was quite difficult to return from. And that's where this quote comes from, one of the young people saying kind of, that bit was a mess. And so in the last session, we kind of returned to investing a lot of time in the warm-up chat and games, and it just kind of, I think, went much more smoothly for everybody involved. So that was a real lesson. And then the last principle is to build confidence and feelings of belonging. So this is about engaging with young people in ways that helps to make them feel confident in their ideas and abilities, but also helps them feel they fit in and are part of the group. So an example of this was that we built a digital music playlist all together as a group that we then played during online sessions. So we started the playlist in Spotify, and in the first session asked everybody to private message us in the Zoom chat some suggestions for a couple of songs to add to it. And we did that after the session and sent them the link to the playlist so they could listen to it, see what was on there, and continue to add more songs. And then we played that before online sessions started and during breaks. So everybody, one of us shared our sound and played the playlist so everyone could hear it. And actually we were really surprised in the kind of the review at the end, how much this was consistently picked out as the kind of thing that best helped people feel like they belonged as a team. And to be honest, I loved it because it took the pressure off me having to pretend that I had in any way cool taste in music. And it kind of started a bit of kind of discussion and like kind of good-natured, well, basically picking on me and Libby for our taste in music. But it actually worked really nicely. So that's an overview of those 5 principles and a few examples, but there's loads more detail and examples in the top tip guides. And I'm sure there's loads more examples that everyone else has that speak to these principles, which I'm definitely personally really looking forward to hearing. So I'm going to hand back to Melissa to send us off into some discussion groups.
Thank you, Catherine. That was a brilliant overview. I'm now just going to pause the recording. I'll try.
And making an individual feel safe and comfortable. And actually that could be much more challenging because it's a young person can feel much more exposed, I think. And Emily was just saying and was cut off with saying that all the stuff that you do in real life about kind of doing your research about what a young person liked, what their interests were, kind of their particular needs and experiences and so on, might be something to build on. Emily, do you want to just kind of come in there and finish that point?
Just on that point, just as you've picked it up, just to say that what happened was, and this is really embarrassing for me probably, she had her camera on. I managed to persuade her to have her camera on, and we were just talking, getting a bit of rapport, and I noticed a poster in the background, a 2-pack poster, and I said, oh, do you like 2-pack? And immediately her camera went off. So that obviously, you know, it's something that if I'd seen her, you know, it probably wouldn't have made her feel discomfort, but because she'd put her camera on, she could see that I could see the room she was in, and that didn't obviously make her feel safe. So I learned a lot from that. So I thought I'd just share that.
That's a really helpful point. Thank you very much. Yeah, so and we also, and there are some other nuances too. We were talking about the difficulties of when you have a group where everyone is new to each other and how you need so much more time, because actually the experiences of some people in the group were with young people who already knew each other, and then it switched online. Now there you had the rapport, you had the stuff that you could build on. And when you have a core, when some young people know each other, you know, you can bring other people in, some people leave, but you've kind of got the people who set the tone, the people who are comfortable, who are confident, who are welcoming, and that can be really helpful. So, you know, sometimes there might be something there about, you know, if you can have 2 or 3 people who you know each other, and help them kind of draw other people in and could do a bit of work with them individually, that might be helpful. We just a couple of, so I did share just from my experience, and I won't do that here, but I'm happy to talk about that at another stage. we did actually share some concrete examples of games and that kind of thing, but 3 things that I think came out from. One is just like a bit of humor really helps. Like, it basically an icebreaker in all but name. Don't call it an icebreaker because everyone hates icebreakers in theory, but in practice they can actually be quite fun. So yeah, a bit of humor is really helpful. Something that doesn't involve technical ability, either IT ability, but also just like watching spelling, drawing ability. You know, people can feel really embarrassed if they're put on the spot and expected to like draw something or type something that's a word they don't know how to spell. And actually, there's some really great free online games, but some of them are not safe. So really make sure if you're going to use some of those online games where you just post the link in the chat and they can hop into it and play together, because there's some wonderful stuff out there. Just ensure that they are actually safe for the young person.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Sarah, and the rest of your group. Garvey, I've noticed you've got your hand up. Is there something you wanted to add to that?
Yeah, it's just something that it just comes to me as we was talking. It's as we would do in the community, if we was doing groups with the young people we work with in gangs and county lands, it would try to see who's going to be in the group, because a lot of young people might have someone who they don't like and someone who they're not going to get on with. And if they had that experience going into an online group for the first time of seeing someone they've had problems with in the past, that could prevent them from doing it again. So it's the professionals trying to risk assess the groups like we would in the community.
Yeah, that's such a great extra point. Thank you for adding that. Yeah, thinking about who's going to be there and that everyone knows who's going to be there and feels comfortable with that. Excellent. I can also see Jessica's just added in the chat that in her last job, one of the facilitators was insisting they were encouraging creative spelling, which made her feel more safe to write in the chat and not be judged. And yeah, I think that's right. That's picking up on Sarah's point that actually it's quite nerve-wracking, like having to chat or like type or spell or draw. I hate drawing. So being forced to do that in an online setting is my worst nightmare. Right, maybe we should just I'm really enjoying that people are adding to things and really want to make sure we do that, but I also want to make sure we hear from each group. So maybe we'll go to group 2, but please do keep on adding these examples. We're going to collate them all and share them like with everybody after the event. So don't feel you need to write everything down. So it was accessibility and clarity of understanding. Melissa, is that you?
Yeah, that's me, Catherine. Thank you. So I think a lot of what we discussed was quite similar actually to what Sarah's kind of fed back on. So we talked about the idea of kind of quizzes and polls at the beginning of a session to kind of get people sort of relaxed into it. We talked about platforms like Kahoot and Mentimeter, you know, as kind of tools for doing that. And we were saying that it's quite good, you know, if you can theme it on the kind of topic of your session, and if people get answers wrong, that's not necessarily a bad thing because you can kind of recap and revisit it at the end. We also talked a bit about kind of anonymizing that, so there isn't that sort of trepidation about, oh, I'm going to be last on a leaderboard. You can actually anonymize, just have little icons and things, which makes it a bit more fun. Mel had a great sort of example of a kind of icebreaker, if you like, that she did around a kind of scavenger hunt. I think you mentioned this, Catherine, as well, you know, asking people to kind of find something in wherever they are, show it on camera. And a good point was made about, you know, giving kind of young people the excuse to put their camera on through an exercise like this just might kind of encourage that kind of camera on rather than the default being camera off. And again, I think, you know, Sarah's point about the difference between kind of group session and individual sort of one-on-one online sessions came to the fore. Mel, who runs a children's home, was talking about when they're conducting reviews online with children, and you might have kind of, you know, the IRO, the social worker, someone from CAMS there. It can be really daunting for the young person. So to have sort of someone who they trust with them, and also to prepare them for what to expect, just as you would, I guess, in a face-to-face meeting, but actually to say, look, this is going to be the format, this is going to, you know, who's going to be here, and help them kind of relax into it a bit more. And then Juliet, who works for Catch-22's Pan Merseyside Child Exploitation Service, again, picked up this point about having trusted a key worker with them. And a great example of some young person she was working with who just felt, you know, incredibly kind of worried about this particular online meeting that was happening, and Juliet kind of sat with her in her car because that was a safe space where she felt sort of comfortable, and they used kind of her phone and just did it together in the car. And it, you know, so the actual setting that you're in can make a big difference, was the kind of sense. And then also Jay made a really good point about kind of digital poverty as well. So Jay's working in a kind of you know, with for prisoners on probation, basically. And so a lot of the sessions they attend are mandatory. So it's slightly different in terms of, you know, trying to get people to engage. But we're sort of saying that actually, if you're sort of penalising people for not engaging, you know, we've got to be really careful about that, because some just won't have the kind of the device or the you know, the Wi-Fi or the accessibility or whatever, but may feel too proud to kind of say that in a group. So it's just sort of bearing that in mind and making it as easy as possible for people to join these things in the first place. Hope that reflects our group, folks, but it was a really good discussion.
Yeah, sounds great. And actually, one of the ways I've found with the kind of helping people not have to feel too proud to say about that actually they'd like, it would be helpful to if you've got devices that you can share with them to use, was actually kind of after the fact. I offered, for these sessions, we offered everything. We offered laptops if people wanted to use them before a session. Nobody took it up. And after the first session, I got in touch with everyone individually, particularly those who seemed to have a little bit of trouble with their sound or other things and have been using their phone, and just said, can we help? And actually, I think having already met them once and being able to do that in that way one-to-one was so much easier for someone to say, actually, yeah, that would be helpful. A few people took us up on it. Brilliant. Has anyone else got anything else they'd like to add in around ensuring accessibility and clarity of understanding, or whether there was just any other ideas that came off the back of what Melissa just shared? In that case, should we go to group 3? So it was ensuring young people feel completely in control and that everything is their choice. Is that you, Nat?
It is, yeah. Yeah, we demonstrated some of the difficulties of doing all of this by having some technical issues at the beginning of our own workshop. So we had a slightly shorter time discussing things, but some of the things that were coming up were just making sure that turning camera on is not forced. I think, as you said before, it's encouraged. I think some of the discussion sort of showed that turning off the camera became something that was more common the longer the sort of like sessions were going on, and people were just going to switch off the camera. So making sort of activities regularly where people are encouraged to switch them on in a comfortable way, in a fun and engaging way, but being able to actually turn them off again, because sometimes you're going to have a conversation where you don't want people seeing the reaction that you're having to, maybe, and certainly in my, in some of the work that we do, when we're hearing a powerful speech from someone about a personal experience, I don't want to have the camera on my face, don't want people to see my reaction to that. I want to get control of myself and come back into the conversation when I can. But we had getting parents or family members on board, people within the family environment that can help, not just with the ensuring that people are engaged, but also with the technology and use of, which is quite, sometimes that's quite difficult if it's not all parents are as technically savvy as their children or young people. It was mentioned a few times, it becomes quite a challenge to monitor what's going on when the cameras are switched off. So it's important to work on that. I think Mark shared use of sort of interactive things like an interactive map during sessions. It's a good way of drawing people in. And I just as we got to the end of our workshop, Mark said, "You haven't shared anything now." So I did, when I was sat waiting for things to for people to all come in, I did write down some of my own reflections on the question. And I think starting with exercises that don't require the camera to be on. So, going back to the things like Melissa was saying about use of Kahoot, Mentimeter, really sort of good ways of just pulling people into the fun aspects of things before they feel like they want to switch the camera on. I always do pre-prepare, and I'm quite lucky because I have a team of care experience sessional workers who are absolutely amazing, and we've worked hard to build their capacity to lead the session. So I do, if they ever come to an LCBF or YPBMF there is always young people led sessions, and they come with so many great ideas to sort of, and we pre-prepare, say, remember when you first came to one of these sessions, how that felt for you. Please switch on your cameras and work on making other people feel, you know, comfortable to do so. And that's what happens really when we do our events. Yeah, so those sort of, you might start with the cameras off, but at some point, early days, have some kind of activity. You know, like a hunt around the house. The scavenger hunts work really well in our events, and usually we get into some kind of conversation about food. What's your favorite takeaway? Although that, you know, often our meetings are quite in the evening. I find it unbearable because I'm usually, you know, I've been there all day and maybe not had enough time for food, and then we're talking about what we call a balm or a BAP, or I don't want to start that conversation now because I'll take this meeting off in the wrong direction. Yeah, and young people involved in all of our planning and agenda, and also, you know, choosing some of the apps or things that we might use. I can see Mel's. I'll stop there and I'll let Catherine take back over.
Oh no, that was great, Nat. There's so many excellent examples in that. Definitely food. I always find, like, even just what's your favorite chocolate bar gets everyone chatting for quite a long time, and then everyone realizes they love a Kinder Bueno. Mel, you had your hand up. Was there something you wanted to add?
Yeah, it was just when Nat was talking, he used a couple of acronyms that I had no idea what he was saying. So it kind of reminded me that language is very important. If we use professional language, you know, I've been sat in meetings and the kids are like, is this about me? I don't understand what they're saying. I don't understand what that is. So I think we need to think about the language we use to engage with kids, and not professional speak, you know. Target your audience, I think, is what I'm saying.
Yeah. Brilliant point. Thanks for adding that, Mel. I'm aware that some people probably need to drop off at around 12ish. I'm going to see if we can just kind of quickly round off the last two groups. So Carly, do you want to share with us what your group talks about?
Yeah, sure. So our group was talking about establishing and maintaining trust in young people. There was definitely like a lot of crossover with what has already been said, but we agreed that we felt that this really was a foundational principle in terms of establishing trust. Without that, you can't really do anything else, whether it's building confidence or some of the other things that we've discussed. I mean, Catherine, as you know, I actually joined you and Libby for one of your sessions and taking notes, and we had a conversation on that because you'd already held your kind of get to know each other sessions. And I guess the importance of me obviously having my camera on, but then speaking myself to people to introduce people, rather than you just saying, oh, this is Carly and she's going to take notes and kind of blend into the background. That didn't really feel comfortable, especially if, you know, as Nat said, we're expecting people to talk about themselves and their personal experiences. I think Katie came up with a really good idea of, if people do want to keep their cameras off, how can you get to know people if you don't have like a visual of them, and maybe inviting young people to create an avatar of themselves, like a Bitmoji, and then if they feel comfortable speaking about that, I think that's a really great way of getting to know someone, and getting to know how someone would present themselves and how they see themselves as well is really important. Jessica talked about her experience as kind of on year of service with Rally International, and I think time and flexibility, as with some of the other principles, was really important. So they had weekly sessions with the senior managers, which were 15 to 30 minutes long. They took it in turns to organize them, and digital games that worked really well were things like online Pictionary. So you take it in turns to write a sentence of what the other person would draw, and then the other person. So it was really kind of interactive, and that seemed to work really well. But throughout, and this is what everyone else has been saying, just that flexibility is really important in making sure that young people feel like they're not going to be judged, that they don't have to do anything they don't want to do in terms of camera work. And yeah, also I guess in terms of maintaining trust, not breaking any promises, so definitely delivering on what you've discussed at the beginning of every session.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Carly, and the rest of your group. I'll just finish up by offering some kind of some of the additional examples that Group 5 talked about around building confidence and feelings of belonging. So Emma mentioned kind of asking people to bring an object that represents, she was talking about in context of representing a business idea, but something that then the group can guess what it relates to, but also that encourages you to turn your camera on because you're showing the object. And also is a kind of a less intimidating way to share a bit about yourself rather than a formal introduction, and can also create a sense of connection when people start to see the kind of connections between their objects or what they're kind of how they'd like to represent themselves. We also talked about young people leading sessions themselves, and how great that can be, particularly if kind of someone's positioned a bit as a master expert in something. So maybe it's just helping people know how to use Twitter or whatever it might be, that kind of can really help people build a sense of confidence. And Martina shared a great example of asking everyone to bring one image, could be a digital image of something for a goal they'd like to achieve. Like could be a really small goal, we're not talking massive, like something like I want to walk daily for 20 minutes, which actually feels like quite a big goal to me. And then people realizing that they wanted to achieve similar things, it was a great way to make connections. And what else? And then for younger children, we talked about sing-alongs to break the ice, bingo as a way for people to individually do something but still feel part of the group. And we also talked actually about ourselves feeling confident and how that can feel like a challenge, that we felt we needed to look like we were confident running online groups or one-to-ones, and that actually kind of being honest that it feels a bit odd sometimes doing things online, and that it's a bit weird and that we don't necessarily know always how things work was actually a really nice way to make everybody feel comfortable and not make us feel like we had to be the experts. Yeah, and then we also talked a bit about the information you might want to share in advance with you in person, which I think picked up on Garvey talked about as well, in terms of like things that help people know what to expect, how many people will there be, if it's the first time you've used Zoom, actually kind of giving someone a Zoom call in advance so you could try it out. So lots of things just to make it much easier. Yeah, realised we've hit just over 12. So Melissa, I'm just going to hand back to you.
Yeah, excellent. I mean, we put this in for another kind of 10 minutes or so. I appreciate some people need to drop off, but I guess now just any questions, thoughts, observations, for Catherine, but also to share with each other, please come forward now. I mean, we've obviously had some great discussion already, but if you've, anything else to share, please do so now. Sarah, yeah.
I mean, just thinking of the one-to-one, because I'm conscious that is actually the bread and butter of Catch 22's work as opposed to group work. And again, these are just kind of things from lockdown, but at the beginning of lockdown, by the end I didn't, but at the beginning of lockdown, I managed a mentor service. And obviously we were trying to find as many ways as possible of the mentors still being able to keep in touch with the young people. And the young people really wanted it at that point. Garvey said that before lockdown, that there was a massive shift in sort of mindset. Before lockdown, people didn't really want that. They just wanted normal, inverted commas, sessions. Suddenly with lockdown, when that was the only option, people were keen to have it. Our Young People's Forum went to 6 times a year in school holidays to once a fortnight online because that's what they wanted. But with the mentoring, what we did is we sent out physical packs, activity packs, pamper packs, resource packs, a whole range of things. But actually, sometimes the mentors just did something online, a physical thing, but online at the same time as the young person. So say mindfulness colouring, they would do the colouring, the young person would do the colouring. And they just kind of, as they were doing it, just chat. So there was no official formal agenda, but just the conversation evolved and the mentor could kind of check in. And then they kind of shared what they'd done at the end to see how different or similar they might be. Or they drew a picture of, we sent out, I don't know if you can get that aromatherapy scented Play-Doh, so they could kind of make things and then try and guess what they were. So we actually just had so there were physical things involved, but it kind of took the pressure a little bit off it being online, and also it was a way of being able to talk without it being very intensely face-to-face kind of thing. So I'm conscious we haven't really answered that question that has come up in several of the groups. So I just could think of only a couple of tiny examples of things that might help there.
It's really useful, thanks Sarah. Lots of people are nodding, which is good. So we were saying in our group, it's quite difficult, particularly with cameras off, you have no idea how what you've just said is going down with anyone. You're sort of a bit in the dark. But yeah, and my camera's just gone off as I said that. How strange. Okay, great. Anyone else got any thoughts that they are like? Oh, Nat, do you want to articulate what you've just said there?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know how much of an option it is for people, but we use Hopin, so we sort of moved off Teams and Zoom with most of our events onto this online virtual platform, which kind of has different areas that you can go to. You can watch a presentation in a stage, you can have group discussions, but it also has this one-to-one sort of, almost like the platform sells it like a speed dating networking function, and it just sort of pushes people into randomly pushes them together into conversations. And at first people are a little bit daunted by it, that it becomes the most popular bit of a session that we do. And following it, if we set it up right, we'll have our introduction, something that doesn't require camera, gets people into the session, a little bit of a group discussion, usually quite slow and sort of, people are quite tentative with it, and then go into one-to-one networking. We just watch the energy sort of suddenly pick up, and people have just built a bit of rapport individually with some of the other group members before they come back. I don't know if that exists on other platforms as well. I've not seen it on, I don't know if they have it on Zoom. Certainly wouldn't want to set up that many breakout rooms, just knowing. I think
you could sort of have it automatically. You could set up the number of breakout rooms, then have it automatically just put people in randomly in pairs or something. You could do that. But yeah, I think that's a great idea. And it's almost, I think what you're describing there, Nat, is kind of building up to that kind of comfortableness, isn't it? Where you have people, essentially feeling comfortable on the platform. And in many ways it is the same with in-person meetings, isn't it? If you get a group of people together in a room who don't know each other or whatever, it can be quite difficult to do. So I think a lot of these issues we're talking about are relevant online and offline, aren't they? Great. Anyone else want to come in? Oh, Garvey, yeah.
Sorry, just another thought. It's with young people in particular, it's about their privacy while they're doing the groups. A lot of young people will be at home with their Wi-Fi, but they could have siblings, their parents around and everything, and that could be another block to them wanting to engage. I suppose asking a few questions of if they've got privacy while they're attending to any meetings, because I certainly wouldn't want to sit down to get problems if my mum is in the kitchen. So it's just about giving them or finding out if they've got the space to have some anonymity from siblings or whoever it may be.
That's a really important point, isn't it? I remember at the beginning of the pandemic, I'm sure everyone experienced that, but it was kind of at the beginning of meetings, people would say, oh, don't worry if someone runs behind, a kid runs in and, your son sort of starts, because it was, or your dog's barking, whatever, because it was sort of, we were all getting used to this new sort of way of working. And, we were in sort of situations with all sorts of sort of people and distractions, I guess, around us. But I guess maybe as we've got into sort of, this is a more regular thing, that sort of, those caveats at the beginning are not necessarily in place, but maybe it is sort of saying, look, don't worry if there are sort of distractions, feel comfortable in what you're doing. Great. Anyone else want to come in? Okay. Catherine, are you happy for us to kind of wrap up? Anything else you wanted to kind of say just to close this session?
No, I felt like there's so many great examples people have shared. I've been writing them down and thinking I'm going to squirrel those away and try them out myself in the future time. So I just wanted to thank everybody for coming along and sharing different thoughts and things that work. I was just, the one thing I was thinking about was what Nat was talking about like that slow building up of confidence, and it just really struck me. Someone had told me never to put people into individual breakout rooms immediately, that young people absolutely hate that, whereas for me, I would actually prefer that first. I would feel like that would build me up. So I was just reflecting on, yeah, Nat said about like starting with a group and easing everyone in before you go to that to then build energy. I thought that was really helpful. So yeah, sorry, that was a really long way of saying no, I have nothing else to add.
No, that's brilliant. Well, thank you, Catherine, for all your hard work on this and for presenting today, and obviously to all our facilitators, to Sarah, Nat, and Carly as well. So I'm gonna finish it here. I'll stop recording, but what